amazing script that they wrote for that one. And you got Colonel Tom Parker to thank for that one, which I'm releasing soon. That Colonel Tom Parker was one of the Joint Chiefs of Staff for Kennedy. And you're going to see this one. It's all the Joint Chiefs of Staff at that time. You're going to find out who they really are.
And it all goes back to Kennedy.
Yes, yeah. Well, it all goes back to that family, which is the German royals that came over. Yes.
Right. Yeah, it goes before that. Okay, so one that I've been so for my own game that I play with these things, on the world stage. So I'm looking at Mike Pence, the vice president, okay? He came out inauguration night, man, and I said, that woman does not look like his wife. That woman looks like his sister, right? And I'm looking at Trump and Melania, like they look like a couple. Everything is flowing there. And I'm looking at these two dancing. I'm like, man, there's no chemistry there, nothing. And she looks out of place.
Yes, the rule that one of the game rules that they have to abide by, and this is something that protects the lie, is the fact that the spouse is typically a sibling of the person that's elected. And you can go through the list and you're like, man, they really do look alike. Or that person, that spouse does look just like them. And you'll find out that everyone that I've looked at so far and I've been able to identify, it's always their sibling. So that's a way for them to protect the lie, and also it's a way for them to travel around as husband and wife and stay at the same hotel and act like a couple outside of that hotel, but then sleep in the same place together, and there's of course no problems. There's no liability that the whoever's in charge of it has to put up with if there were, like, say, two actors.
Right. And the thing that, to get over the cognitive dissonance a little bit, is they're doing this because this is their family. This is their family bonds. This is how they make their money. This is what they rely on for their lifestyle, for their whole thing. This is family.
Yeah, I think it's when it started off, I think here in the United States, the main focal point was, say, Abraham Lincoln, and we started to see that type of media conglomerate involved in government as they're in bed together at that point. That was one of the pivotal points that I found. I mean, I'm sure it goes way back. But Abraham Lincoln owned a newspaper, and he had to sell it before he became president. John Wilkes Booth was an actor. His whole family were actors. And then when you look at John Wilkes Booth and Abraham Lincoln's son, you'll see that it's the same person. So again, you keep it in the family, you keep the lie together, and that's how they use it to promote and push their agenda, and also for content for their media. It's amazing.
It's so funny. Right now, I'm in Kentucky at the Revolution Radio headquarters here, having a little summer camp, and we just went the other day to the temple where Abraham Lincoln's parents were married. Here in Kentucky at the it was the old Fort Heron State Park. So it's just.
Well, there's an amazing thing about the Lincoln stuff that I've exposed. At the time of the Civil War, Abraham Lincoln, of course, was in charge of General Grant in the North. The Southern president at that time was Jefferson Davis. If you look at Jefferson Davis and you look at Abraham Lincoln, they look very, very similar together. And they're also both 6'5", which is very strange for that time, very tall person, but they look exactly alike. So I went, wait a second. So I did the ear analysis, and the ear was slightly different. But you could see the same genetic features on the ears. They shared them both. I found out that that's his brother. Okay, so you have brothers as the presidents of the North and the South. You also have Grant, and you also have Lee as the generals. Okay, now when you look at Grant, I've traced him as being the father of Teddy Roosevelt. Now, Teddy married a Lee. All right, so there's all these different. You see the names being just intermixed, and it's amazing the spider web that it creates, and you can follow the whole tree straight down to today. Of course, our presidents, the Bush family, and the Kennedys, and it's all the same family members. That they're basically the same bloodline has been in power since I can trace back to Abraham Lincoln. So.
Right, and they did it though through all the means, through the television, all those faces we watched through the 50s, 60s, and 70s. They did it through all the music we all loved. We all were. I'm telling you, I still play 60s, 70s, and 80s music, and it takes me back to time. Reminds me of all these memories. And they set the stage. Oh, Disneyland, and everybody going to Disneyland, and then but now it's all falling apart right now.
Yes, I think. I'm sorry. Go ahead.
And I'm wondering why and at what point in our history will the cognitive dissonance go so that they can be held accountable for the lies? I mean, it's been a whole lie.
Well, I think the holding them accountable is going to be something that's going to happen in the public arena, because the laws that are in place protect them. And like I said, it's their right to basically lie to you, and they can do that. And it's our right to not believe them. But there's going to come a point where people are going to get fed up, and they're going to have, a knock at their door, and there's going to be people out there with pitchforks and, torches wanting to take them out to the city square and whatnot, but the town square. But when you look at the other question was they've been using the media. The thing that they've been relying on, and remember back in of course the early days of this country, there was no ID. You didn't have a driver's license until I believe like 1902 or a little bit around that area. So there was no real form of identification, and you didn't have the internet. You didn't have the ability to research it. So if you were, say, campaigning for Abraham Lincoln, and you would maybe see his face maybe once if they came through your town on a train and he did his speech on the back of the caboose and then they took off. Or you would see maybe one or two photographs on, a poster on the post office wall. That would be the extent that you would know of that candidate. So it was very easy for them to con the people at that time. Just growing a beard and 10 years later, that person, shaving their head bald, they look like a completely different person, and nobody would think of it because, of course, the problem that we have as human beings is we're trustworthy. We trust other people too easily. And these people have found that as the Achilles heel of humanity, and they've exploited it. So now advance to today, where you have technology has now caught up with them. The science with the biometrics, the internet connecting the peasants together now with the click of a mouse, where now we can communicate. I think it caught them a little bit by surprise at the fact that, wait a second, the technology is here, and now we're putting things together. We're putting those puzzle pieces together. They're starting to get afraid. They're starting to get scared. And they're going to be laying it on us even more so when it comes to the media, to the point where you're basically going to have to turn the TV off. Now, what have they done at that point? They're going to go to the internet, in which they've been doing now. They've been really ramping up the online distribution of the media. So the TV is going to go away in the future. There will be no more TV. There will be no broadcast. You'll get everything streaming in from your internet connection, your smart TV, your Chromebook, whatnot. And that will be your new center of focus of the entertainment and for your information. Now, the reason why is because if you look at the FCC and the laws, they have hoax laws. Now, those laws pertain to free broadcast airwaves, not to cable, because that's a subscription. They can put whatever they want on cable because you pay for it. That's a subscription-based. They can do anything they want. But
that's why it's switching over?
Yes. Free air broadcast, they have those rules where they can't show certain things a hoax. And what you can do is you have power, as the FCC has given the people the power. You can write to the FCC and write to the station that shows you that event that you know is fake. You send a registered letter to them saying that this information that you presented is not correct, is fake. Here's my name, address, and whatnot, my contact information. Register that letter so then you get a receipt that they got it. Now, if you look at the way the hoax rule is written, they must abide by that, and they must not say anything that has to do with that event again. And I've told people that you can use this to your benefit, and you can stop them from showing you these stories that you know are obviously fake. So at that point, you have that little bit of an advantage to the situation. So that's why they're now pushing it all to subscription-based and internet-based, because then they can do whatever they want, and you have really no say over it. So there is that legal loophole, and they're addressing that way. The other one that people always try to use is the gun grab. This is the reason why they're doing this, for the gun grab. And I argue that it's not for a gun grab because, first of all, they own some of those companies that make those guns, those manufacturers, Colt, Smith & Wesson. These are very, very old companies that they've invested in. So until you see those company owners stepping up and saying, hey, wait a second, this gun grab thing is not going to happen, because that, of course, is their business and they're going to have to protect their customers. So they would be front line and really fighting for the people to keep their guns. But they're not, because they know that they're not coming from the guns. And the reason why I say this is because they want you to buy more. They want you to buy all the ammunition that you want, all the guns that you want, because if they really wanted your guns or really wanted to get you in trouble, they would pass legislation to make you afraid to use that gun. That would be the way that they would go after the people. So the stand your ground states like Texas and Florida, they would go after your ability to use that weapon to protect yourself in your home. and that's where they'll put you in jail for. That's what they
Okay.
want. Yeah.
So we have a question coming in from the chat room, and also it coincides with the topic I wanted to bring up to you, and that would be that of pedophilia. So here's the question. Question for the guest. There is a lot of conjecture out there about how John Podesta is the biological father of Chester Bennington. They certainly have similar facial features. Can you speak to that?
I don't know. Chester being the lead singer of Linkin Park that passed away. I don't really know, but what I will say is, if you see that name of that person that's in the entertainment business, especially the music industry, like Chester, when you see that name being used in the media to either whatever to announce their death or anything else that they've done, know that that name is most likely not owned by that person. It's owned by the record studio. So whenever they use it, it's used for publicity reasons. So just know
to help you separate the name from the body of the person.
Correct. So yeah, that's where I talk about this in length about how the radio industry created this. They created the selling of the soul, basically. So they see somebody who's talented, a musician is talented, and they want to record their record. So back in those days when radio was first beginning, the DJs were the most influential people around. They could make or break somebody. They could make you famous in one night by playing your album on the radio. So they wanted to be able to control their ownership of that person. So what they would do is they would give that person a pseudonym and say, here's your new name. We own it. The studio owns it. We're going to make you famous. We're going to record your songs, but you're going to accept this name. And of course, the artist was like, well, of course, sure, no problem. I'm going to be famous. Here's my album. I'm going to be rich and famous, which they got paid handsomely for. But at any time, if their value if they became worth more dead than alive, they would do what's called legend them, and they would create a legend out of them. They would stage a fake death. All these rock stars that died at that one age, and they would then bring that legend into existence, and then they could basically their value of that name would just skyrocket. So, but that musician, of course, not owning that name, they had to accept the fact that they can't be that person anymore. And of course, they would collect their royalties and get paid, so they really were fine with it. But
Elvis brought in a lot of money.
Oh man, I mean, Elvis brought in a lot of money when he was alive, but when he was dead, even more. I know,
even more
crazy. Yeah, and the funny story about that is Tom Parker, Elvis's manager. They say that Renee met with Tom to introduce him to Celine as somebody that Tom should represent. That's a story that's been established. It's been out there, and so that's the funny little connection between the whole thing. But the selling of the soul has been that they've of course taken that out of context and tried to make it some type of literal thing. But it's basically that artist signing over that name, their rights to that person, their likeness, and at that point the studio then owns that character and they can do what they want with it.
So getting back to the pedophilia thing, I did want to ask you about that. It is the number one business in the world. It is the number one way that at the end of the day that these people think it's a privilege. Now, how in this game of the world stage with all the actors and we know the children, the rituals, etc., are part of their life. What information do you have about that with these characters as you have been exposing?
Well, I do know that in some of my background, I'm considered a FBI court expert when it comes to file sharing, and I was called upon by the FBI to be involved in a case when it came to crimes against a child, and this person was caught with of course child pornography, and then they wanted to go after him for distribution. So they called me in and they wanted me to examine his machine and to see if he was the person that they could say definitely was the one that was sharing this pornography. Long story short, he was found guilty and basically got another 10 years on top of it. So during that trial, I was, of course, exposed to the images and, of course, the description of some of the things. And, of course, I saw the things on the machine. So I do know, and I can validate and say that, yes, there definitely is. That is happening out there, and there are people that are getting caught and prosecuted for it. The reality behind things like this, when you see on the news them talking about a public official and you see people accusing them online of being a pedophile, there is a very simple. It's a line that you cross when you accuse somebody of being a criminal without that person being involved in a trial and being found guilty of being that criminal. That's libel. You can be sued for that. So when you see these media outlets saying a name and referring to this person as a criminal, as a pedophile, and they haven't been tried, they haven't been found guilty of it, be very, very suspicious of what you're hearing, because that media outlet, and like I said before, they have tons of lawyers that go over every single word that's going to be said and every single story that's going to be said. If there was any gray area where they could get sued or held for libel, they would not air that story. So know deep down inside that those individuals are working for the same team. They're actors that are involved with the same network, and they are allowing this to happen in order to stoke the fire, in order to get people to react. But in reality, if this were to happen in our world, if I were to accuse somebody of being a pedophile and I didn't have anything to back it up with, well, then they could sue me and I could definitely be held liable for it. So without those cases being filed, I seriously question if they're real or not. But like I said, this does happen in reality, but you'll never hear about those real events because people have privacy laws that protect them. So, and until they're proven guilty, they can't say anything about it.
Okay, well then let's go to the court system and the foster care system, the adoption thing that does go through the courts, the guardian ad litems, conservators, and all this, and how that they're trafficking children behind the scenes. Now, these are politicians in those judgeships, etc. Now, do you know about any of those?
I do know some things about when it comes to the CPS. I had, unfortunately, a friend who had their child taken from them, and I asked her some questions because I had heard, of course, of this happening. It happens all over the place, but I never really saw the documentation behind it. And I asked her, I said, what did they show you? What did they come to you and knocked on your door with to make you think that you had to be able to take your kid? And she showed me the paperwork that they handed her. And of course, she didn't know the law. She, of course, was believing what she's being told by the judges and by the court system. But when I looked at that document that CPS official gave her, and I read it, my jaw dropped. And it basically said that this person may be a threat to her child in the future or could be, and they used all these different, like, she might be doing this or possibly is caused.
That's called precatory language.
Yes, and I looked at this and went, wait a second. You mean to tell me that they knocked on your door and took your kid and gave you this as the reason? I said, okay, if you did do something, if you were found guilty as being a drug user and putting your child in harm's way, okay, that's a problem that possibly you could, you have to deal with. But she had done nothing wrong. This was somebody who had accused her, an anonymous person had accused her of doing these things, and they
I see. So what you're saying is that a lot of times that people the ordinary man or woman just doesn't know their basic rights when it comes to the government coming. Yes, that happened to me too.
So I told
my
her,
rights.
I told her, I said, at that point, I didn't know too much about the CPS. And I said, who gives this organization this authority to do this? And she said, well, it's not even a government agency. It's a public agency. And I said, okay, so you're telling me that this public agency, by the court, by the judge saying that they have the rights over your kid, they can come take your kid. And then when I started to research it, I found out some pretty interesting things about about when you create a child, that's your child. It's your property, and if you refer to it as a child, then it becomes in their jurisdiction as the Child Protective Services. But if you approach it as this is my property, you can't take my property, and you have to be very careful with the words that you use because it's a very, very,
the word child it's called a color of art. Actually, a child is it's an art form.
Yes. So as long as you stay away from using that child or my son or my daughter, then you are in a different realm where if it's your property, you can't take my property.
You can't take my property, right?
Correct. And you treat it as a theft of property situation, and they have to back down on it, and they'll give you your child back. I've seen several people get their children back because of this, and it's a fight. But because usually they don't find out about this information until it's till the child's been taken away. So they've referred to the child as a child, and they've gone and they've played the game that the courts have made them play, and they didn't know their rights and didn't know what they were supposed to say and what they weren't supposed to say. So at that point, it becomes a little bit more of a fight than if you were to take up this position from day one when they try to take your property. So
and a couple of people in the chat room, they want to know, where are you located? Are you in Canada? Someone's asking.
No, I'm in Texas. I'm in Dallas.
Texas. Dallas, Texas.
Yeah, I had to, they're probably getting that information from my website, my server information, because I was attacked here, and I had my servers, of course, in California and all over the country here, and some individuals that were involved in the people that I was outing, they went and they made some claims to the host that was hosting my website. They shut me down, and then they shut me down in the next one. So eventually I just said, you know what, I'm just going to take it to a different country, and I took it to Canada. And they tried to do the same thing there, but this time they made it personal. They attacked the management of the host, and they put pictures of him and his family up online, and were basically making some accusations against him that they could get sued for. So at that point, he called me and said, "You know what? Normally I would just shut the count down and say, this is too much of a problem. But she made it personal now, so he said, I'm on your side and I will protect you." So I was like, "Great, that's awesome," because it's very difficult to find free speech." Platforms. Very.
Oh, well, you've come to a good place here, Revolution Radio.
I'm finding out. That's appreciating, definitely.
Oh yeah. If anybody says anything with everyone, Hawk will get them.
Yeah, definitely. I appreciate that, and that's one thing that I've been doing this for the past 6 years, and I've been shut down on YouTube at least 4 or 5 times. I've been shut down on all the other video hosting companies, and like I said, my hosting company, I've been shut down on that about at least 3 times. So how do you think your information is going to cross the cognitive dissonance barrier to just get into people's, like, a little more percentage? Like, how can we get your message to, like, infiltrate? It's so powerful when you see Desilu Productions, when you see all of the things. I mean, your work is so worthy just to be out there for everybody just to witness. I just don't comprehend why more people don't know about it. Thank you. Well, the way I look at that, and this is how I've basically I can address that, is I think everybody is on a personal journey, their own personal journey. No matter what you are shown, if you're shown a smoking gun, if you're not, are we still on? I think.
Yes, I
okay.
think we are. Let's see.
Yeah, we have 909 on the line as well.
Okay. All right.
I'm just out. Was just going to ask if you could give out your website. That's all.
Sure, WellAware1.com, and that's the number 1. WellAware1. And you also on YouTube. On YouTube, it's Dallas Goldbug. So when we're on. Okay, thank you. You're welcome. When we're on this personal journey, we all have a certain understanding, a certain level of ability to interpret what we're shown. If you're not of a certain level, you basically could be shown 1,000 smoking guns. And what it will do is it will make that person immediately build a wall, and will look at that person showing them those smoking guns as a threat to their reality. And at that point, that person will back down and build that wall, and you have to just let them go, because there's no way to convince them. There are other people that are of the ability, that are able to look at things with critical thinking skills and some logic, and put it behind them where they can see the business aspect of it, they can see the profitability of it, and they can then start to understand, okay, this is a simple business. These people are doing something that's not illegal, it's business. And then they can approach it that direction. And depending upon how far into the legal aspect you are, you will understand it more and more. But all of them, when they get to a certain point, when you have to take those blinders off and you start to realize that, oh man, we've been lied to our entire life here. Everything that I think I know, everything that I've been taught in school, it's all been a lie. When you start to get to that, you're going to start to have a physical feeling, a physical pain. And this is where when I was on Joyce Riley's show, I didn't tell anybody about that because I didn't know what I was experiencing at that time. It was heartbreaking. I was so depressed. It was hurting. So I go on her show, and I'm not telling anybody about this stuff, and I'm just going through the story. And somebody called in and said, "Hey Ed, what you're telling me is, I just wanted to let you know that it makes me feel like somebody kicked me in the gut, and I feel like this pain." And at that point, I went, "Oh, wait a second. okay, so other people are out there are experiencing the same rebirth, the same.
It has been a
pain.
physical one for me too.
It's so physical that it's like, I'm not even exaggerating this. It's really, it takes you for an emotional roller coaster ride that is just
Mine
like,
was for 2 weeks. I kept shaking my head and shaking my shoulders, saying, "No, my reality's okay. It's okay." I'm like, "No, no, no. Your government is trying to kill you." Okay, then I go along. 3 hours later, it would be like, "Wait a minute, your world is upside down." I'd be, "No, no, no," and I would have to. I would actually have to shake it.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
About 2 weeks, lasted for 2 weeks.
And then you start turning on TV, and eventually the actors, you start to see them, and you start to see how fake these events are. You start to see the set, like when the State Department does a press conference. When you look at that set, if you can't tell me that is not set up by the Saturday Night Live people, by the director of photography, that it looks just like exactly like a Saturday Night Live set, and it is. It really is a total scripted out event for them. And once you hit that point where you can see it, and then you go to my work and you say, okay, Ed might be, he might be crazy. I'm like, fine, that's your opinion, fine, but look at the facts. And you start to look at the biometrics. It doesn't take a scientist to understand that. Here's the gridded out ear. Here's another gridded out ear. Oh, there's their spouse. There's their sibling. And they all match to that event. You start to go, wow, wait a second, whoa. Right. And then
so for the caller caller that's just calling in, that was Dallas Goldbug, YouTube channel, Dallas Goldbug.
Yeah. And people were like, well, I've had to go through several of these emotional roller coaster rides because, I'm like anyone else. I had people that were my heroes, that I looked up to as growing up, and, and some of them are musicians, some of them were, artists. And I look at this whole thing and I go, man, that's just, why can't I just have one? Just let me have one.
I know. Like the seventh one, when I found out the Laurel Canyon, all these songs I loved, when I found they were all faked out, I was like, another knife.
Yep. Yeah. And you see the Helter Skelter thing, and
right.
Charles Manson. I mean, he's a lieutenant. He's in the military. He's a military person. That's another one that you have to understand. This whole background of the military people involved, and of course you can see him. I've found photographs of him at the Occupied event, and he's still got the tattoo on his forearm. They tried to cover it up, but you can match it there. You can also see him in a bunch of other events with the Greenbergs, and it's just and basically the his sister was the one that was, of course, he was supposedly had murdered. What's her name? Charles Manson had.
I can't remember his name either.
I can't remember the woman that she was pregnant and they murdered her. And
Sharon Tate. Sharon Tate.
Sharon Tate is his sister. So there you go.
Oh, really? Oh, I never knew that. Wow.
Sister. And it's amazing when you see it. Well, he was supposed to get married not too long ago, and when they showed the wife, the person who was going to marry him, I looked at her and went, wait a second. That looks like it's going to be his daughter or his granddaughter, because she was really young. And then, of course, her mother standing right alongside of her. They're involved in this news article about them volunteering time at a women's or a homeless shelter in California. When I looked at that and went, wait a second, that's going to be his daughter. And then you look at Sharon Tate, and you look at the family, look at her brother, and look at the daughter. It's, of course, the whole family, again, getting involved in it. So it's just actors passing along the baton to their family member and keeping it on in the family.
The news and the world out there, it's really a scripted story for all of us to partake of, which we have, to our own demise.
Now, you ask, okay, well, and who's in control? Well, if we look at history, and we look at, it's going to be somebody that has a lot of money. It's got to be somebody that has an enormous amount of money. Well, when you look overseas and you see these massive castles that are built, understand that those people that had those castles built, those royal families, they had a lot of money, and they invested that money in, of course, businesses. And over 2,000 years or so, you're seeing that money, that investment, of course, basically work its way into every aspect of government and to business. And it's very difficult to even throw a stone without hitting one of these family-owned or family-associated businesses. So the biggest thing that they had, and you can this is documented throughout history, is almost every single president that we've had has had an association, a family member, a direct sibling or whatnot that has owned a newspaper or magazine or media. Just look at the Kennedys. Of course, they're big time in magazines and publications. But they've used those books, the printing press, as their ability to basically control society. And one of those books that they used is the Bible. So, I mean, religion is something that they used to control the masses. They use whatever they they need to control us and make us believe certain things that keep us in check. And once you realize who's creating this, who's behind these things, and then when you see royal family members taking part in these events, and you can ID them, then you know that, wait a second, okay, if you're going to invest your money into a foreign company overseas, who do you want to have manage it? Well, you want one of your family members to manage it. So,
wait, I have 10 more questions. We're almost out of time.
What's out of time? Oh, we are. Oh, well, I guess we'll have to continue this chat next week.
Oh, my word. That really did just make me just think of so many more questions that you were just going down. It's just phenomenal. But if you people really want to find out, go to the YouTube channel. There's a lot of stuff in there that will just go back to some of the